And Trish is muted.
Excuse me.
We're ready to go, Simon?
Yes, Councillor Mancini, Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you, Simon. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. It's December the 16th. It's 4 minutes after 6. I apologize for the delay in starting. We had some technical issues, but good to see everybody online. To begin, call this meeting to order. We'll do a little bit of a roll call to make sure everybody's audio is working well, starting with Councillor Hensby in beautiful District 1.
District 2, Eastern Shore.
Oh, 2,
ho, ho,
that's
ho.
right, sorry, yeah, my apologies. You're always number 1 in my books, David, you know that.
All Bruins fans are.
Thank you, and then I see Councillor Trish Purdy. Councillor Purdy, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Saying hello from District 4 this evening before the snowfall starts. I'm kind of excited.
Don't get too excited, Councillor. Councillor,
I'm excited.
Councillor Kent, welcome. You're muted, Councillor Kent. You're muted.
It keeps muting itself. I didn't touch
there you
it
go.
twice.
Welcome, Councillor Kent.
Thank you. I am happy to be here on behalf of the great people of District 3.
Welcome. And last but not least, my partner in crime in Dartmouth, Councillor Austin.
I'm here, Mr. Chair, and I have less of a fondness of thinking about tomorrow's snow.
So I think the suggestion is everybody will have our phones call forward to Councillor Purdy since she's so enthusiastic.
The joys of a rookie councillor who hasn't had their first snowstorm yet.
Well, welcome to my colleagues, and we have numerous staff members, and maybe we could do a quick little roll call. I believe our solicitor this evening is Claire Gillivan. Claire, are you online?
I am here. Good evening.
Welcome. Good evening, Claire. Good to see you. Our numerous outstanding planners. I think we have Catherine Green, Carol Purvis, Maggie Holm, the Elandrel. Have I missed anybody of that crew?
Hello, councillors.
There, thank you. So I didn't miss anybody there, did I, Carl? But Carl, Maggie,
I think
Thea.
we may have Jamie Ellen Klenovic and Megan Mond as well.
Oh, look at that. And then, of course, we have our legislative assistant, Simon, and council, and also pitch hitting or backing up is Liam. Is that correct?
That's correct. And our legislative support for this evening is Hannah Forsyth. Hannah
handling the production. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. Well, good turnout tonight. Let's get to the task at hand. The first item on the agenda, 1.1, election of the chair and the vice chair. So I'm going to turn that over to our clerk. Simon, I'll let you take over on the election of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council, I'll take over the role for the election of chair, and following the election of chair, the new chair will lead us through the same process again through the election of vice chair. The process for the election of the chair will begin by nomination. Once we open the nomination period, any member of Community Council can nominate themselves or any other member for the position of chair. Any nomination just simply requires a seconder. Following a couple of nominations, I will call 3 times to ensure that there's no further calls for nominations. And if we have one nomination, then that person will be elected by appointment. If we have multiple nominations on the floor, then the committee can discuss, and if they would like, we can proceed by way of an election by secret ballots, and I have some links in which I can share to the members so that we can carry on an election via secret ballot, if that's the direction that Community Council wants to go. I should stop at this point and just ask if there are any questions from any of the members regarding this process. If that's the case, then I officially open the period for nominations for the position of chair.
If I may, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, please.
I mainly, we had a bit of an informal discussion 2 or 3 weeks ago, Harbour East, where this was batted around. The main question I have, it's actually for Councillor Hensby, whether he was interested in this or not. He never had a chance to chair last time. To be blunt about it, some of my more senior veterans was eliminated out of turn. So, and I never have heard that Councillor Hensby had an interest in it. So if Councillor Hensby is keen to do it, I think it would be fitting for us to give him the opportunity.
Sorry, is that the interest for chair or vice chair? I'm confused now.
Chair.
Awesome. Well, thanks for letting me know on top of all that. That's fine if Councillor Hensby wants to go for the chair. I thought last time we discussed it, he was interested in vice chair, so I'm a little bit confused on the conversation right now.
I'll be pleased to serve as chair for this first year of the new council.
Can I just confirm, Councillor Hensby, are you seconding the motion as well?
Well, is it a conflict for me to second my own nomination?
Yes, if there's someone who can just briefly second that nomination.
I'll second. Thank you. Becky.
Excellent. I have a nomination by Councillors Austin and Kent to nominate Councillor Hensby. Are there any further nominations at this time? I'll ask a second time, are there any further nominations for the position of chair? And a third and final time, are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Hearing none, I am happy to announce Councillor Hensby has been appointed the chair of Harbour East Community Council, Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. Welcome, and I will turn the election of vice chair over to Councillor Hensby. Actually, sorry, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. We do need a motion to close the nomination period.
So move.
From Councillor Purdy. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
And Councillor Kent. Thank you very much. Councillor Hensby. Mr. Chair, the election of vice chair is yours now.
Thank you. I'm glad to see they're not going to be on Santa's bad list now. Just joking. Anyway, I'll take the nominations now for vice chair of the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. Floor is now open.
Mr. Clerk, I believe, again, through some of the conversation that we had just informally, Sam, you had expressed an interest in taking the vice chair, although, so I'm interested to know if you still have that interest. I know there were some concerns around scheduling and such, and I'm feeling a little out of I guess out of sorts with. It appears that maybe Tony didn't know that this motion was coming on the floor, so I don't see him here anymore, but maybe someone can answer. Was Tony chair in the past? Tony, are you here?
Yeah, I chaired before. I took over the chair because Councillor Nickel retired. I was so I was vice chair at the time.
Oh, I see. Councillor Austin, sounds like you have something going on here, so I'm gonna.
Well, I'm realizing I've made a mess of things this evening. It's totally out of sequence. Yeah, it was. I think this was supposed to be Councillor Mancini as chair, Councillor Hensby as vice chair, and then it would be David moving into chair position once he was done, because that's typically how it goes. I missed that.
Well,
David, would you be okay moving to?
I'm prepared to swap. I'm prepared to swap.
Yeah, my apologies, colleagues. That was the discussion, and I totally made a mess of it.
Okay.
I thought Tony served a year as well, but I guess it was a partial year.
Well, I only, I served before as chair and earlier on,
Yeah.
but this past was Laura Lee, and it was just the last meeting since she retired.
So,
We
So you
have
had-
to do
so you-
reconsideration of what we just passed.
well, he had been chair in the past, and I thought and there's always been practice in the past of rotating on.
Yeah, and that's fine, David. If you want to chair it, I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
And David, were you ever chair before?
Once before, a long time ago.
Long time ago, a long time ago, I expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where's he at? Are we nominating Sam?
Well, I think.
Vice?
Well, I feel like, I mean, it should have been Tony chairing, but asking him to do vice chair for another year. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel that I had a chance relatively recently that if Tony isn't going to do vice chair, then perhaps one of you might want one of our new councillors might be a good idea to have you as vice chair, to then basically get a sense of what it involves and then be ready to move into the chair position rather than me.
And I'm fine with that if either Councillor Purdy or Kent is interested in vice chairing. That's fine.
Well, Becky, have you ever served as chair when you were in the community council for?
No, I didn't get to chair. I was vice chair, and I'd be happy to do that now.
Well, I'll.
Vice, so.
Yeah. I'll take a nomination for vice chair then.
I'll nominate Councillor Kent as vice chair. Mancini.
I second that.
Thank you, Trish.
There's a seconder for that nomination.
Yes,
I'll
Trish.
Second.
Trish, okay. Trish, okay. Councilor Purdy. Are there any further
Chair.
nominations? Are there any further nominations? Third and final call for nominations. May I have a motion to close nominations for vice chair? I have a motion to close nominations, please.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councilor Austin, seconded by Councilor Mancini. All in favor, say aye.
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 Welcome aboard, Councilor Kent for vice chair.
Thank you.
Next item of business is the annual report. We have it before us. Is there any special presentation on the report, or just receive it? And is there any conversations about it?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to the Community Council, you can receive the annual report before you. There is a motion to accept and table it, and I can confirm regarding the public participation portion that we have no registered speakers to speak to regarding this item.
So, Mr. Chair, I can put the motion on the floor if you like.
Certainly, sir.
That the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council accept the table the 2020 annual report as presented. So moved.
Seconder, please.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Kent. Are there any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of receiving the annual report, signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you very much. Report received. Next item of business is the approval of minutes of the special meeting of November the 12th. I have a motion, please.
I move to approve the minutes of the November 12th meeting.
Seconded. Councilor Austin. All those in favor of the minutes of November the 12th?
Aye.
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 Okay, approval order of business. Any additions or deletions? Anything to add or delete?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Community Council, the Clerk's Office has not received any requests for additions or deletions at this time, but I open it to any members of Community Council.
Any councilors have any motions or any issues with the agenda? Hearing none, I'll have a motion to approve the order of business at tonight's meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Mancini, seconded by
Second.
Councilor Beck. Becky Kent. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carried. No business arising from the minutes. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest tonight? Hearing none. No motion of reconsideration, no motion of rescissions, no deferred business, no tabled matters. Now go to item 10.1.1, case number 22519, development agreement for 1129 West Pepeswick Road in West Pepeswick. Have staff to come forward and make a presentation, please. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to the Chair and to the councillors. My name is Megan Mond, and I am a planner with HRM Planning Applications, and tonight I will be presenting for the public hearing of case 22519, which is an application for a development agreement for an intensive agricultural use at 1129 West Pepeswick Road in West Pepeswick. Next slide, please. So the applicants are Bianca and Pierre-Luc Sevigny. So we're on slide 2, sorry. The location of the site, as I just mentioned, is 1129 West Pepeswick Road in West Pepeswick. The proposal is to enter into a development agreement to allow for an intensive agricultural use, specifically to allow for a small abattoir, which is also known as a slaughterhouse, and to have additional animals, so up to 200 domestic fowl and up to 55 other livestock. Next slide, please. So this map here, so it shows where Musquodoboit Harbour is, and so the site is approximately 5 kilometers south of Highway 7, where it passes through Musquodoboit Harbour. Next slide, please. So the 7.5 acre site is at the corner of West Pepeswick Road and Westside Inlet Drive, and it abuts Porter's Cove, which is an inlet of the Atlantic Ocean. There is a stream, and that is represented by the thicker line, blue line on the image on the left, and that runs along the rear of the property line towards the Porter's Cove. So the site is predominantly vegetated with mature dense vegetation along the rear of the property, as you can see on the image on your right, and well, partially it's an odd image, but you can see there that there is some vegetation there, and the land has been cleared already for a barn and pens for a limited number of livestock that are permitted under the current regulations. Next slide, please. So I have several pictures of the site. They are a little dated now since I took them in the fall of 2019, but it will give you a sense of the area. So on the screen here shows the entrance to the site along West Pepeswick Road. So the image on the left is looking north, so towards Musquodoboit Harbour, and then the image on the right is looking south, so that would be heading towards where the intersection of Westside Inlet Drive and West Pepeswick Road intersect. Next slide, please. So in October 2019, the barn that is on the property was still under construction. As you can see on the image on the left, I do believe it's finished now. And then the image on the right is at the rear of the property. So it's looking out towards the ocean there at the entrance of the inlet. Next slide, please. So the site is designated mixed use under the Eastern Shore West Municipal Planning Strategy, and this designation supports the continuation of existing land use pattern, providing for a wide range of residential, commercial, resource, traditional, and community facility uses. And the enabling policies for this application are MU17 and IM10, which I'll speak to in more detail on the following slides. The site is zoned mixed use under the Eastern Shore West Land Use Bylaw, and agricultural uses are permitted in that zone. However, the type of activities associated with agricultural uses are limited, so you couldn't have an abattoir of any size, and the number of livestock cannot exceed 50 domestic fowl and 10 of any other livestock. The property is currently being used for agricultural purposes, as you saw in the images. So there is the barn already on the site and a limited number of livestock. Next slide, please. So policy MU17 enables council to consider intensive agricultural uses by development agreement for lands within the mixed use designation. So the proposal is for a small abattoir, but the only policy option for an abattoir would be to use the policy that enables intensive agricultural uses. So in considering an agreement for an intensive agricultural use, regardless of the size of the abattoir or the number of animals, council must consider the following. So that the site has a particular locational advantage in terms of the availability of resources. That one really does pertain to a use that would rely on natural resources such as forestry. That there's adequate buffering and screening measures in place to reduce any visual noise or odor intrusions to the surrounding development, that there are adequate measures taken to protect the natural environment, that the proposed agreement requires appropriate permits and licenses to be obtained for the proposed use, and the provisions of policy IM10. Next slide, please. So policy IM10 speaks to matters that council must have regard for when considering development agreements, and these matters include that the proposal conforms with the intent of the MPS, so the municipal planning strategy, and with the requirements of all other municipal bylaws and regulations, that the adequacy of such things as on-site sewage, that there's adequacy for such things as on-site sewage systems and water services, as well as road networks leading to and adjacent to the development, that the proposed site is suitable in terms of such things as the steepness of the grades, the soil and geological conditions, the location of water courses, and the susceptibility of flooding, and that there are controls placed on the type of use to reduce conflict with adjacent or nearby uses through such things as the height, bulk, and lot coverage of the buildings, traffic generation, access to the site, and parking, as well as open storage and signage. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you will see a picture of the site plan. So there is quite a lot going on here, but there are a few elements that I would like to highlight. So the blue squares and rectangles kind of clustered on the northwest of the site represent the various proposed structures, pens, and pastures, and the barn that's already been built. So as you can see, the developed area is proposed to be closer to the West Wapeswick Road rather than towards the back of the property. And access to the site is from West Wapeswick Road. And I'll show a close-up image of the developed area on the next slide. And then on the site plan, you'll also see various red lines, and those represent distances from neighboring wells, water courses, and property lines. And so the agreement sets out minimum required separation distances from those things, such as the wells and the dwellings on other properties. And I will speak to those in more detail as well in a little bit. Thanks. Next slide, please. So here you can see a closer view of the proposed development. So there's the barn in the middle, which has already been built, and then the abattoir, which is proposed to the north of the horse pen, and would have a maximum footprint of 576 square feet, which is about the size of a typical residential detached garage. So it is quite small. There will be some pastures and pens, as well as some small enclosures like chicken coops and rabbit pens around the site. And you can see here that the driveway is a one-way U-shaped driveway as requested by the Department of Transportation, and parking would be to the south of the driveway. Next slide, please. So with an intensive agricultural use, the policies ask council to consider the effects on the natural environment and surrounding development. So the image on the slide is a map, and that forms part of the proposed agreement, and it represents where the proposed development can and cannot occur. ensuring that there are significant clearances from watercourses and neighbors. So the hatched area, which is labeled as Area 3, in there, no development or livestock is permitted. So essentially, there can be no disturbance, including the removal of vegetation. And this non-disturbance area serves to help mitigate nuisances and to protect the integrity of the soil close to the watercourse. So the area in solid gray, which is labeled as Area 1, this is where the permitted development can occur. And so while the site plan shows the development clustered in the northwest of the site, it is important to ensure that the animal enclosures can be moved around the site for the health of the animals. So we are letting those move around, but it would be within a limited area on the site. And then the kind of spotted area, if it shows up on your slides there, Area 2, which is between Area 1 and 3, that is where limited disturbance can be permitted. So things like the pens and the fences for the like the chicken coop and that sort of thing could go there, but the more permanent structures like the abattoir or the manure storage facility could not be located in that area. So keeping them away from the watercourse there. Next slide, please. So in terms of public engagement, the level of engagement was consultation achieved through a public information meeting in November 2019, a mail-out notification, newspaper ads, a web page, and signage on the site. The feedback generally included concerns about the number of animals proposed, how manure, odors, and pests would be managed, and about potential contamination of the inlet. There was a mix of support and opposition for the abattoir itself, and there was support for having meat produced locally and being able to visit a farm in the neighborhood. So 90 notifications were sent to surrounding residents, letting them know about the public information meeting, and approximately 80 people attended the meeting. So since the mail out, we've received 4 emails and 4 phone calls and had 1 meeting with a resident. And the webpage was viewed approximately 811 unique times since it was posted in September 2019. Next slide, please. So some of the key aspects are a summary of the proposed development agreement includes, so the proposed agreement permits livestock farm, which allows for the breeding and handling of livestock, primarily for commercial purposes, an abattoir for processing domestic fowl and rabbits, as well as retail and market outlets for the sale of perishable agricultural goods. The agreement limits the number of animals and the type of livestock to a maximum of 200 domestic fowls, 6 horses, 8 hogs, 4 goats, and 30 rabbits, as well as up to 7 other livestock, which cannot include various larger livestock, such as cattle. And the agreement also permits various other uses permitted in the underlying mixed-use zone, including retail stores, a single-unit dwelling, and open space uses that could complement the farm. So through the development agreement negotiation process, staff have ensured the scale of the abattoir is small in response to concerns raised by the community. So the abattoir itself cannot exceed a footprint of 576 square feet, and it must be designed, built, and operated in compliance with all provincial regulations. The agreement also requires that manure that's stored on site must be within a roofed structure that keeps the manure contained to prevent runoff and seepage into the ground. And the structure will also need to be designed to help screen the manure as well. Next slide, please. So in addition to limiting the size of the abattoir and the number of animals, the agreement also controls the scale of the development by limiting where development can occur through setbacks and the non-disturbance area as shown on the map earlier. So there are significant setbacks required from wells and dwellings on neighboring properties, from property lines, and from the watercourse. And so as I had shown on that map, there were some large non-disturbance areas that prohibit all development. So it prohibits development within 50 feet of the north and south lot lines and prohibits development within 250 feet of the watercourse, although most of the development is actually has to be 300 feet from the watercourse. Next slide, please. So the development agreement permits certain non-substantive amendments. A non-substantive amendment is a change to the agreement which can be made without a formal public hearing. So instead, Community Council could authorize this change by a resolution. The non-substantive amendments are changes to the amount of any type of livestock, but not the overall number of livestock. Changes to the dimensions of the developable areas. Changes to the design of the manure storage facility, and extensions to the commencement and completion dates. Next slide, please. So I think it's important to highlight that there are a number of different regulatory bodies involved with agricultural activities. And so I've included this slide just to highlight the roles of various government departments. So Nova Scotia Department of Environment is a pretty big player when it comes to agriculture. They regulate the design and the operation of abattoirs, and they also are involved with wells, groundwater, and surface water. So they would be the regulatory body to report any contamination of wells, or sorry, to investigate contamination of wells or a stream and lake. The Department of Environment is also responsible for the farm animal welfare program. So that includes enforcing farm animal welfare provisions of the Nova Scotia Animal Protection Act. So they have inspectors who would investigate any reports of animals in distress and the habitats that they're in. The Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans would be the agency responsible for investigating any issues of contamination into the ocean, so any runoff from the farm into the ocean if that were ever to occur. The Nova Scotia Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal regulates the access and egress to the site, and they also have regulations that relate to the proximity of buildings and fences to any road that they own. So they do have to ensure that those structures are back from roads. And I have included Nova Scotia Department of Agriculture on here. They do not regulate manure management, but they do have guidelines around managing manure. And then HRM, they would be responsible for the permitting of the buildings and the structures, as well as compliance with the development agreement. Next slide, please. So staff recommend that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the proposed development agreement as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated October 26th, 2020. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Are there any questions of clarification by councillors on the staff presentation? Any questions of clarification?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask some questions.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you. So I know that concerns have been raised on the size of the volume of, I guess, the animals that can be in places such as this. So do we have any data that would give us some form of, some sort of idea? I'm no expert in farming, but I've lived on large parcels of land and seen lots of things, and that's all I can draw on. But it does seem small, and that worries me a little bit given the amount of disturbance area. So I'm wondering, would this be typical that we would have farms like of this size or agriculture of this size on such a small parcel of land with that volume, potential volume, because I don't know if the applicants are going to start there or not, but the potential volume, would this be kind of normal, or it just seems small to me, even just looking at it?
Megan?
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself there. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the councillor. So this has been a question that has popped up throughout the application. I did research on the number of animals for a site, and it was quite inconclusive. It didn't seem like there was a rule of thumb. I looked at various other land use bylaws. I did speak with the Department of Agriculture on this subject as well. Now they do have their manure guidelines, and those guidelines do speak to how many animals you could have on a site, but that is The number is tied to not actively managing the manure, so it would be if you were spreading it. You can look to other land use bylaws in the municipality for kind of some ideas on it. So for example, in Musquodoboit Valley Dutch Settlement land use bylaw, there are places where intensive agricultural uses are permitted. And so an intensive livestock operation, they define it as having 30 manure animal units, and there's a table that kind of associate how many animals associate with the manure animal unit. So it would be based on the nitrogen production, and then ties that to the acreage requirements. So for that, it classifies intensive agriculture as having 30 manure animal units. And so for this site, they have 6.64 animal units or manure animal units. So 5 times less than what is considered intensive in Musquodoboit. And for comparison, if you had the 30 manure animal units, and so you were classified as intensive, your site would have to be a minimum of 10 acres, which is larger than what this site is. This site is 7.58 acres, but looking at it, it's about 5 times less manure animal units for a site.
I think I understand that.
It's a lot about manure, but ultimately I would have to conclude that I looked at a lot of different things. It didn't seem, there was no conclusive ratio for how many number of animals was appropriate for a site. So we did look to regulating where those animals could fit on the site, and then leaving it to the owners to be responsible in terms of making sure that they do have enough space for the animals that they're raising, and then leaving it to the Department of Environment to intervene if there were questions about whether or not that the space for the animals was too cramped and not appropriate for the livestock.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions. Is it okay to carry on? Okay,
Certainly.
so when I think about an abattoir and its slaughtering, it occurs to me what regulation or what is in place for waste management around that.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the Department of Environment is the one who regulates the design of the abattoir itself. So ensuring that the design of the building it is designed to have proper treatment of any of the waste coming off the animals. And they also are responsible for being on site when any processing is happening. So really the Department of Environment is the group that is there to regulate the design of the building, ensure that there's licenses in place, and to ensure that that processing is happening with the regulations, including the Meat Inspection Act, I believe is what it's called.
So from the municipal perspective, and if we've set a regulation around 500 square feet space, does that include waste management within that space?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, in terms of the actual design of the space, I believe there is some capturing within the space of the waste, and it would be up to the applicants to work with Nova Scotia Department of Environment to ensure that that design meets the standards that they have set out.
Okay. When you first started the presentation, you talked about the screened buffers. And you mentioned odors. I have yet to know a farm that can control the odors for miles, let alone 50 meters. So I'd be curious to see what they can come up with there for that one. So the slide that you had, and I looked it up in the presentation, the staff report, it was hard for me to see or identify any part of an abattoir being recognized on those plans. So I'm looking at Site B plan, and then the larger one, Schedule C, and I can't see anywhere there where they have identified where an abattoir would be. Would that be required something within the barn? Where I'm going with these questions is to understand, again, it was around the idea that this could potentially be a small area, and I know that's been raised in by the public. If it was a small area, and if we don't have a sense of where that is, or whether or not it's captured within the constructs of what's being shown on these schedules, what's to stop them from adding to the building footprint in order to achieve it, and therefore then taking up more of the land that is at play and available, would be normally available to the animals.
Council, just to let you know, if you zoom in on Schedule B or C, it is a small square block on the top northwest corner of the property. The small square block.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
Above
Okay.
That's where it's located.
Okay. Thank you. I missed that part. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I will also note that in terms of your question about what's stopping them from expanding on that, the agreement in the text itself limits the size of the abattoir, so it can't have a footprint greater than 576 square feet. So something like a 24 by 24 square foot space.
Okay. Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the time.
Are there any further points of clarifications or questions from councilors? Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Becky, for raising those questions because they were some of mine as well. Will this abattoir take in other animals to slaughter, or just the ones on there? Like, will it be a community? How will that be regulated? The animals allowed in to be slaughtered.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So that was a question that was raised. So the development agreement itself, it does limit the type of animals that can be processed on the site. So it would limit it to domestic fowl and to rabbits. And then in terms of the size of the abattoir itself, that would also, I think, be a limiting factor in how much you can actually process. And other than that, I would leave it to the Nova Scotia Department of Environment to be regulating the processing of the animals in the site. So there's nothing in the development agreement itself that says you can't take something from off-site, but the agreement itself does limit it to domestic fowl and to rabbits, and the size of the structure is very limiting.
And just reading the correspondence from people who were supportive on one hand, but concerned on the other, what recourse would neighbors have if the noise, the odors are, make their lives severely affects their quality of life? What recourse do they have? How would they be able to, what would they be able to do?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, it's a good question, and I think I would go back and lean on to the regulatory bodies that are involved, and also look to the root of the problem of why there's odor issues or why there's a lot of noise issues and that sort of thing. So if it was that the animals were in distress and their habitat was not appropriate, then that would be something that the Department of Environment would intervene on in terms of animal welfare. If it was due to odors and they weren't storing their manure properly and in the contained space, if they were keeping it on site, then that would be something that would be the development agreement can regulate, and that would go through HRM itself to ensure that it's in compliance with it. So, I mean, farms do make noise, they do have odors, and what we have worked with in the development agreement is to find the best approach that we can in terms of a balance of letting a smaller scale intensive agricultural use happen, and maintaining as much of the natural vegetative buffering that we could in an attempt to mitigate some of those issues.
Thank you. Thank you. That does answer that. And just one more. 200 fowl. Was there any negotiation in trying to maybe decrease that amount of number if space is a concern for people who seem to have some experience with this type of thing?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, to the councillor. No, this number was the number that the applicants brought forward with us. And through all of my research, I couldn't find a conclusive number of what was appropriate for, in terms of a standard across the board that municipalities use to determine how many livestock per acre. So with that, it would be an arbitrary number of me asking to reduce it. So the stance that I took on it was to try to limit where the development can occur. And again, that does play into limiting the space where all of these animals can can live. But it was that balance between protection of the environment and buffering the development from other places, paired with still giving some space for the animals. And maybe ultimately it may not be enough space for the animals, but I don't have a conclusive answer on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other further questions or points of clarification from councillors? I just have two, just to ask regards to containment of the animals. Will there be fencing around the property to contain them within the footprint of the full property? Because I'm pretty sure the chickens and rabbits may be free ranging on the property and going into the wooded area. So I'm just kind of curious of what kind of containment of the animals will be required.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know Department of Transportation also had the same concerns and said, no, we can't have these animals running across our road. I will let the applicant speak to more details about how they are containing the animals, but the development agreement itself, it does not allow for any of the animals, the livestock, to go into that non-disturbance area. And so they would have to be contained in some way to keep them out of there in order to ensure compliance with the development agreement.
Well, how you stop the chickens and the rabbits? So I can understand the donkeys and the horses and stuff, but and the sheep maybe, but it might be a little more difficult for the smaller animals. But we'll have that come forward by the applicant.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you for that. So before we go to the public hearing, I'm required to read a disclaimer as set up by the clerk's office. Let's get it here. Thank you for joining us for the public hearing for case 22519. The order of events for this virtual hearing will be similar to a regular public hearing. We will start with the staff presentation and give the applicant an opportunity to present via phone, and then go to the public hearing speakers list. And we have, I believe, 2 people signed up. As a reminder to all the speakers and those watching from home, in order to have signed up as a speaker, the deadline was 4:30 yesterday. And also you had an opportunity to provide correspondence up until 3 o'clock today. So I have a list of 2 speakers that I'll call upon in a moment. Before that, I'll ask that all speakers remain on mute on their phone until your name is called. And once called, you can unmute your phone. You have 5 minutes to speak. And once you have completed your comments, please mute your phone and then leave the meeting and hanging up on your phone call. These meetings are webcasted, and you can view the rest of the proceedings via the link on halifax.ca. So at this present time, I'll call now for the applicant to make a presentation to council.
All right. Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes. You have 10 minutes.
All right. So the agenda for tonight. We'll start with who we are, the why, the what, the where, and the when. Most of it has already been covered by Megan during her presentation. So we will go over them a bit quickly, and we may add some details to answer the previous questions that were brought up. So next slide, please. You can move 2 slides, actually. Sorry, I just forgot to ask you to switch to the agenda.
And could you speak up as loud as possible, please? You
hearing me right like that?
That's better, thank you.
Perfect. So who we are? Bianca is a marine biologist. She works part-time with the Navy. She's a deep animal lover. She likes to cuddle with everything that has fur.
Yeah, and Pelik's a mining engineer. He works in and out 2 weeks up in Nunavut and 2 weeks back home.
So moving on to the why we do this, our mission is to utilize modern sustainability methods to provide a flow of ethically raised meat products, and incorporate agrotourism to promote small-scale farming. So next slide, please. The what? Here we are asking to raise the animals and build an on-site abattoir. Next slide, please. For the number of animals we're asking to raise, 200 domestic fowls, which would include 100 chickens and 100 ducks, and 50 other types, which would be 6 horse, 8 hogs, 4 goats, 30 rabbits. Next slide, please. Concerning the abattoir, just to add to the points that Megan had mentioned earlier, we would not be able to take larger animals, let's say cattle and such. It would be designed only to do rabbits, chickens, and ducks, and it will be designed by the Department of Environment, which we have been in contact with, but we do not have an official design, as it will come later in the process. We will also be limited on the number of animal we can process because of the size of the septic that will go with the said abattoir. Next slide, please. The where, Megan covered it earlier. Next slide again. Next slide again for this one.
All right, so some concerns from the public meeting that we had last November. So this we already covered, so the environmental impact. So I do want to highlight that there has been environmental farm plan completed. It wasn't required, but we completed it before doing the farm and going forward with the project. And like Megan said, we're only going to be using a portion of the land, so about 30% of the land. We're going to keep as natural buffer of those trees that she outlined there. And our plan was looked through by the Department of Agriculture. So we were working with them from the beginning to sort of plan our farm. One of the issues was, next slide. So one of the issues was not enough land, and one of the councillors brought it up, was concerned about, you know, that there's not enough land for given the number of animals. So next slide. So Megan is right. It's just to find any sort of literature about it. But just to give you some perspective, an average Canadian farm that raises chickens raised 36,000 chickens in a batch. Okay, and there are some Canadian trends going towards larger farms, less farm, and significantly older farmers. So if you put that in perspective for us, if you're looking at doing something intensive, so we're being classified as intensive, but to give you an idea of what intensive actually is, would be 60,000 birds per acre if we were actually intensive. So it's just a kind of formality that we're getting classified as intensive. If you look at just organic regulations, which there's none officially in Canada, but there is in the US, and they give you 2 square feet per chicken, which is 20,000 an acre. And then just looking at guidelines online, and the various guidelines go from 80 to 400 chickens per acre if you're free ranging them, and that's just to let the land absorb and reclaim that kind of manure. So R200 really is very minor, but it's really hard to get to something definite about proving that. And in terms for the pigs, next slide. So in terms for the pigs, so again, an average herd of pigs is 1,720. Okay, and they're usually given about 7 square foot for a full-grown pig, and that would be 6,000 pigs an acre. So we're asking for 8 pigs, and we have 10 acres total, but we're planning on only using 30% of the land. So our 8 pigs would really only require 0.32 acres, and that's from looking online and looking at homestead guides, and there's nothing official that says how much land you need for free ranging, but that just kind of sort of gives you an idea. So we're not asking for a lot, and there is a lot of land that absorbs that manure, that can filter it and recycle those nutrients. So next slide. And then lastly, so the horses, goats, and rabbits. So all of these 3 animals, we're going to be managing the manure. So actively picking up the manure and composting it. And that goes into what one of the counselors asked about odor. So the biggest causes of odor would be the large animal manure, which is the horses and potentially the goats. But the goats are they're limited inside the barn. The horses have a pasture, but that manure on the pasture is not being left on the pasture because our pasture is not big enough to recycle that manure. So it's being picked up and moved to a composting area. And then, so next slide. So then what do we do with the manure? So Megan already talked about it. For our compost, there is specific guidelines on how we're going to be building it to prevent any sort of environmental damage. But also just this year, in this 1 year that we've been kind of experimenting and doing things, we realized that we actually need to add the manure directly to our soil. So I actually have look to the right, there's a soil sample, like we took a soil sample of our property, and our soil is very poor because it was subsoil. So the land used to be a hill with an old farmhouse. They ripped out the farmhouse and ripped out the hill. So you leave, they just left this really infertile soil. So we're actually right now adding it to the land in order to get it more fertile and get it more healthy and increase the drainage on the property. And as well, what we've been doing, and you can see in the middle, is we actually have been giving the manure away. So we didn't know that the public would really like manure. We thought we would have to compost it before giving it away. But all the gardeners in the community have been coming and picking up our manure. So it's another option. So we have plenty of options. If we don't want to compost, we can give it away, apply it to the land. There's so many good benefits to having manure. Next slide, please. So yeah, noise pollution. So we do have that buffer, like Megan mentioned, around the property in order to reduce the noise pollution. If neighbors are finding any issues, we can work with them directly. What animal is causing them issue, and then we can work with them if we move the animal to another part of the property. But we can discuss that when the point comes. Next slide. So runoff from the inlet, yeah, Megan already mentioned again. So the land is a bowl because it used to be a hill. So where the footprint of the barn is, everything is retained in that land, which makes it really hard to manage the land because of drainage, but that also means that none of it is getting runoff towards the inlet. And if it does go runoff to the inlet, in the agreement, we have a very large buffer zone. So, and all of that has trees. So there's all sorts of trees that will filter out any possible runoff that will go through. Next slide. So an issue that came up last year was that we don't have a background in agriculture. How are we going to do this? So I am now taking a part-time Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. So I am educating myself and trying to get current with other than using YouTube and books and whatnot. I'm trying to use the education part to get our farm going and to do things the right way and use new technologies to do better farming. Next slide, please. And yeah, another problem that came up was attracting rodents. So this is our rodent deterrent team. So we do have 2 dogs and 2 cats. The dogs don't stay on site all the time, but the cats are there all the time, so they manage the rodents. Next slide. So one big thing, why do you want to farm in your community? And I'll let Pielek, I'll talk about this. So yeah, a big thing is addressing the food crisis. Like we're currently going through a food crisis. We have these huge farms that are growing and growing and raising large animals. Oh, okay. Well, that's one of our goals, is just trying to move away from that and promote small farms. Next slide.
So we also have a part of the education program through programs, workshops, the 4-H, as well as educational tours, because everybody wants to go home at the end of the day having learned how to milk a goat. Next slide, please. We also have a farm connection for local youth. Our door are open for kids to come and play around with the animals and also give a hand. Next slide, please. We also increase tourism. It's a good reason to stop by and give half an apple to a horse, to pet an animal before you go home, just to decompress from the city pressure. Next slide, please.
10 minutes
and
has
we
elapsed.
also promote. local jobs and local businesses. Next slide, please. And as well as the most important point would be the community event. We hosted a few yoga sessions, goat yoga session this year. And we also had a Christmas market fair, which over the one weekend attracted over 1,000 persons. And we also had, at Halloween, we made a maze on the second level with the hay bales for the kids to play around with. And next slide, please. We just want to say thank you to everybody, to say that your support so far has been awesome, and it's been a great adventure.
Sorry, you went over.
No trouble at all. I see we have a couple councilors for questions. Councilor Austin and then Councilor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the applicants for the presentation. The one question I have is the manure management piece, where they're indicating it's going to be picked up. I guess I'm a city kid at heart. How is it that will actually happen? People powered? Is there some sort of tractor that they intend to drive over the land? Like, how will the manure actually be gathered up?
So believe it or not, it's all manpower. So we don't have a lot of animals. We just have 2 horses. So every day we pick it up with a wheelbarrow, and even when we get up to 5 horses, it'll be the same exact thing. We'll be able to pick it up. It's not a large amount of manure. It's just 5. I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure we can find those numbers for you of how much manure it is actually. So the tractor isn't required for the amount of animals that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, you finished off strong, because now Councilor Purdy and I will be signing up for the goat yoga. So let us know when your next class is, because we'll both be there. I like the plan. I like to hear about the food security, the education programs, the free ranging, the local business. I guess the one thing that's kind of the flag that went up for me when I heard your business model. I understand both of you are doing this part-time, and because you both have careers, and so I'm concerned when you're not there. Are there times when both of you are not on site, and is there a manager? How does it for the residents, and if they have issues of noise, smell? And I understand, as Megan mentioned, there's regulatory bodies that are responsible for a lot of that. But if this is not a full-time gig, how is the response to the community going to be handled?
So I'll just correct you. So this is full time for me. I don't have, I have a part-time job with the Navy. So I work 1 Wednesday evening a week. And then that's pretty much it. And then I have those 1 online class with housing and agriculture. And Pierre is on and off every other 2. So he's here full time for 2 weeks, and then he's gone. And as well, the last point is we've been working a lot with the Workaway program. So we have had 2 workers on our farm the entire summer. So, that's how we have the manpower to pick up all that manure.
Well, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I heard that you worked part-time in the Navy, so I thought that was more of a time constraint. So that's great for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for the presentation. Let us know when the goat yoga is going to happen.
Are there any other questions, councillors? If not, I had just one question in regards to fencing on the property. Department of Transportation had expressed some concerns of animals wandering. Do you anticipate having a containment plan in regards to trying to keep them within the property, and are the smaller animals, the ducks, chickens, and rabbits, allowed to free range into the forest land?
Yeah, I can answer that one. For the horses, obviously they're fenced. The rabbits are not free range because they will go away. And for the poultry, they are naturally not interested towards the road, but if they start going that way, we will put up a poultry netting to contain them. But in the year that we have the few up there so far, they stayed at the back of the barn. They rarely make it to the front of the pasture.
Thank you. Councillor Kent, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. This is a great presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you for that. I'm encouraged to see that you are continuing your education around this piece. It's a big commitment and certainly a big investment. I do have a question around where you live. Will your intention be to live on this site? I didn't see anything that indicated a home. Are you very far away from it? Again, puts me back in the place where Tony or Councillor Mancini was talking around if there are concerns. Will there be someone on site every day?
We actually live right beside. If you remember on Megan's picture, you actually see our house down by the water. So we do get our little nature walk in the morning. Going up to the farm, it takes us about 2 minutes to walk up the hill.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you very much. No, I couldn't see that, so thanks. Thank you, muted, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions of councilors or points of clarification? Hearing none, I'll now open the floor to the public hearing. Just to remind some of the rules, you have 5 minutes to speak to the topic. Please keep your comments respectful and on topic and directed to the chair. And there are 2 speakers signed up for tonight's public hearing, Mr. Wayne Hopkins and Matthew Randall. So I'll ask Mr. Hopkins, if you're on the line, to please make your thoughts known. Mr. Hopkins, are you on the phone? You may have to hit *6, I think, to unmute.
Yes, that's correct. If you hit *6, that will unmute your phone.
Mr. Hopkins, are you on the phone? I'll go and ask, is Matthew Randall on the phone? Hello, who was that I just heard? I see some other numbers calling in, 403-808-1981. Who might that be? Hello, please.
This is Simon,
is the caption.
Hello? Can someone please identify themselves? Maybe a bit of a time delay.
This is Matthew Randall.
Hello, Matthew. Thank you for calling in. Please make your comments known to the Community Council, please, in regards to case 22519.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. David Hensby. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. I've been a long-term resident of the Muscat Harbour area. I'm also a avid gardener and aspiring farmer myself. Upon learning about the proposed farm here in our community, I was very excited and happy to hear that that's going to be taking place here. I think it's something that we really need here in this community. To be honest, I find it very disturbing that there's even a debate on whether or not we should support a small farm in our community. I feel that I just want to reiterate as well the classification of the intensive farming. Like Bianca had alluded to, that it's a formality to be allowed to allow the abattoir. It's not actually because the spacing is going to be intense. It's really quite liberal when you're considering the average size of farms today. Like she had alluded to, I mean, you go to the grocery store, you're picking up a chicken that's grown there. That chicken laid in its own excrement for days on end. They had very little room to move about. These are large farms that are supporting all of these large food chains and things like that. So it's very important to, give these animals a good life, and I feel that this is the way to do it. We talked a lot about, in recent years, about the economy, the need to support local jobs here on the Eastern Shore, supporting small businesses and supporting local. And it's been a lot of talk, and I feel like now it's time to put this into practice and stand up and, and help some young aspiring people to really help them make this an endeavor that can be profitable for them. Sorry, I think I have a bit of a delay here.
Is that it, Mr. Randall?
This is Wayne Hopkins.
No, sir.
One moment, Wayne. You'll be next. So, Mr. Randall,
one of the, sir, yes. I feel like it's a privilege to have folks here in our community that want to step up to do their best to ensure that we're all fed, especially during trying times such as these. During a global pandemic, the need for local food is more important than ever. What happens if supply chains get shut down or interrupted? Having a local farm will be essential for our future here to ensure that. To hear the sound of ducks in a situation like that might mean that you actually have food to eat tomorrow. To smell that manure and know that there's somebody there to support our community in hard times. And I think that Pierre-Luc and Bianca are the ones to do it. Myself and my family have been doing some volunteer work at the farm. We like to go down there at least a couple times a week to work with the animals. And I've seen firsthand their excellent management skills when it comes to the livelihood of these animals and their freedom and health, and also the management of the manure. And I know that the abattoir, they would do just as an amazing job really managing that and, you know, really giving back to our community. So I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and to Pierre-Luc and Bianca, I want to say keep up the great work, and that I know a lot of people in the community, such as myself, have been honored to help you guys out, and we're very happy to have you here in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hopkins, are you on the line? Mr. Wayne Hopkins?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay, I just want to begin by thanking the Community Council for the opportunity to speak. It's rather curious and coincidental, because I thought it would be tough tonight being virtual rather than in person, because sometimes the reception along West Peswick Road is inconsistent. As you said, my name is Wayne Hopkins. My wife Rosemary and I live at 96 Westside Inlet Drive, a short distance from the 70 duck farm. We are retired and we just moved here in the past May. We consider ourselves very fortunate to be residents of Musquodoboit Harbour. We enjoy our neighbors and our local businesses. My wife and I like to state right up front that we fully support the dream and vision of this young couple as they embark on a new adventure, and much like our own in moving here. My presentation is not going to speak against the proposal or question the 70's sincerity or plans. Rather, I wish to reiterate some concerns expressed at the previous meeting a year ago. As I poured through the minutes and comments, I hope that the council as well and the planners reflected upon and considered the points expressed by the public that short time ago, as they will tonight. And as our local councilors know, city employees, you're there to represent us and implement taxpayers' viewpoints, and we hope that happens tonight. Just a quick comment on a couple of things were mentioned before my presentation as we watched. I noticed the senior planner mentioned, she made a comment about no conclusive evidence. I just want to briefly say that I did some research on best management practices for small farms in Canada, and it gives some absolute number of pounds of waste per animal permitted. If there's one constant in farming, as many farmers know, it's poop, and a lot of it. One horse creates 50 pounds of waste per day. A pig, 9.5. A laying hen, 1/4 pound. A goat, 4 pounds. So just roughly counting, the 6 horses, 100 chickens, 100 ducks, 4 goats, the pigs, roughly comes out to about 420, 425 pounds of manure a day. And if you really like math, that's 425 a day, 3,000 a week, 12,000 a month, and 144,000 pounds per year. So just to allay some of the comments, because my comments are going to be positive, I have to do express, though, to the 70s, enough manpower for that much manure is, I guess, something we have to find out. So after looking over the plan and the minutes from the past meeting, my wife and I came to some conclusions, or we had some questions or concerns that came out of it. Certainly with intensification going on in cities like Halifax and Dartmouth, and intensification of a property of 7.5 acres, they're going to draw accolades and criticism for sure. And after slide 16 by the planner about non-substantive things, I think that waste and numbers of animals are substantive, not non-substantive. At the last meeting, a local resident, Mr. Major, with over 50 years of farming experience, shared his wisdom. He questioned the number of animals for the limited size of the property, the confinement of animals versus rotation, as well as concerns about mixing certain animals together. Has anyone consulted with him in the past year to gather some real facts?
That'd be Ms. Major. That's a lady, not
okay.
a woman.
Sorry, after all, experience and age equal wisdom. Another gentleman, Mr. Walwood,
35 seconds.
suggested that the project be staged in 3-year intervals, 25, 50, and 100%. This review process would allow ample time to observe any problems with waste runoff and farming practices. His suggestion would most certainly remove most, if not all, public resistance to the project. Most importantly, it would really reinforce the value of our community involvement, community building. In closing, we're in turbulent time as businesses face tough economic decisions, citizens confront their own conflict, hope versus uncertainty. Now it's the time. All we're asking is the city look at the timeline. Rather than the COVID crisis being a daily reminder for us, let's—
5 minutes is elapsed.
Sorry?
5 minutes is elapsed.
Need to wrap up, please.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sorry, I was unnerved by the start.
Yeah.
All I'm asking is, on behalf of my wife and I, and also other residents along the road, is that we fully support the young couple with their endeavor. It's a dream, we do that, but I think it's, when there's big decisions like this in critical times, it's always time to slow things down, put things into a slower motion. The decisions are based on solid evidence, on data. So tonight, let's do the right thing and get things done right.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Mancini, you had a question to clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hopkins, you may have said it in your opening, but where do you live in relationship to the property in question? How close are you to the property?
Very close, right around the corner. We are on the 3rd lot over from the French duck farm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we close. Those are the only 2 people that signed up for the public hearing, so we'll now close the public hearing in regards to any other public input. I want to acknowledge the correspondence that was also received. I believe that's been circulated by the clerk.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair.
I believe it was what, five pieces were there, or 5 pages, or?
I believe in total we've circulated 2 packages of, I believe I counted 14 pieces of correspondence that has been circulated to all members of the Community Council.
Thank you. Any questions of councillors? I'll entertain a motion first, and then we can open the floor for debate.
We'll close the public hearing, and do you want to put the motion?
The only motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carried. So someone can please make a motion on the floor, please.
I can do that if you would like, Mr. Chair. We're trying to find the motion here. Yep. I can do that for you, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Councilor Mancini.
The Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantial of the same form as set out in attachment A, the staff report dated October 26, 2020, and 2, require agreement to be signed by the property owner with 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council and request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, which is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilor Mancini, seconded by Councilor Beck. Becky Kent, sorry. Okay, sorry about that, Becky. Okay. Commentary, questions, debate, please. Anyone like to speak on the matter? Hearing no input, as the local councillor, I have a couple questions to ask back to staff. In regards to ramping up the farm to its full number, I see that Councillor Purdy. Would there be an opportunity for them to ramp up their numbers, or is it going to be like instant tomorrow? If it gets approved today, then what's the process from after tonight? How much time will they have for the development agreement to first be finally approved, go through process? If there's any, is there an appeal process to follow after tonight? Please clarify the process after tonight's hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, there is an appeal period. It's 14 days from when the advertisement goes in, which would be this Saturday if it were to be approved. And then from there, it would be signing and registering the development agreements, and then obtaining any appropriate permits that are needed for any structures for the animals. And that would be whatever processing time it is in the permitting office right now, which I think it's a little bit longer than normal, but a few weeks for processing permitting.
Okay, Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. The alternative, what was subject to modifications, how like of numbers of in connection a little bit. The staggering start of the, well, 25% is low, but even 50%. I'm just wondering, with the community concern, I love this idea. This is amazing, and I want to be able to support this 100%. But I'm really I'm struggling because of the, I think, valid concerns of, you know, the neighbors, the community around it. So the numbers of the animals and I guess the waste that they produce in the small amount of land, even though the applicants did address that, I don't know, I feel uneasy.
May I intervene on your behalf? Is there a possibility through the development agreement, could we have a staging or a ramping up time, like 50%, 75% to 100% of the amount of animals they're requesting, and give them time to ramp up their operations to make sure they can manage and handle it, and also to ensure compliance to all the regulatory rules and stuff. You know, I hate to see them get overwhelmed with the 200 fowl and the amount of horses and pigs all at once, but if they were to ramp it up and give a period of time to do that, is that something the development agreement could allow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, the development agreement isn't written in that way. So the agreement would just have the maximum cap, and they could proceed to have the maximum number of animals on the property at this time. In terms of whether or not a development agreement could operate in a phased approach where you can have so many animals by a certain year and having another amount of animals within a next number of years, that is something that I'm not sure how that integrates into a development agreement, whether or not the charter would allow that type of regulation in a development agreement. And I'm going to pull in Thea on that one. Thea, the principal planner for the rural applications. Do you know if a development agreement could have a phased approach like that for the number of animals?
Good evening, Council. Yes, Thea Langell, Principal Planner of our Rural Policy and Applications team. You could have a development agreement that would put in that phasing. However, what you're looking at for this evening, it couldn't just kind of be added in at this particular point. We would have to look at that and come back at a later date with that recommendation. What I would suggest, based on Megan's work on this particular file, as well as our conversations with the applicants, really don't see them kind of going the 100% on day one. This is a, it's a family-owned business. It's a small operation, and they would be doing it over phases in order to get to that point anyway, is what I do believe. They are invested in this property. This is what they're looking to do. So I think you're going to see some of that anyway. What Megan has also done through the development agreement is try to provide all those protective measures to address the concerns from the community and really mitigate to where that activity can actually happen. And again, the numbers you're seeing in the development agreement are only maximums. Doesn't mean that that is the number they will come forward with on day one.
Okay,
Thank you. And thank you, Dave, for rescuing me.
Could I ask, in regards to the certain milestones as the applicant moves forward, getting the other permits from the other departments, what requirement will the applicant would have to post those publicly so people will know Department of Environment, Department of Agriculture, Department of have all done their due diligence and provided their certificates or their permits? Is there a requirement for public notification or posting of those?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your question. So no, just like any other development that would be considered as of right. So if your zoning already permitted a development, there is no requirement for public kind of display beyond a sign on your property that has your permit, showing that you have your permit if something is under construction. So if you walk by a house that's under construction, there would be that sign saying there is a permit issued, but there wouldn't be a public notification that would go out that would alert the public that a permit has been obtained. Now, from an HRM perspective, if they were to apply for the permit to construct the abattoir, the development agreement does require that the applicants themselves provide evidence that they have received the appropriate licenses and permits from Nova Scotia Department of Environment to construct the abattoir itself. And so the development officer wouldn't sign off on the building construction without having the licenses from the Department of Environment in hand.
Thank you. And I believe with food processing facilities, what an abattoir is, they're probably required to be posted on site anyway. So I would assume. But we can get that clarification from the Department of Environment. The development officer can figure that out. Are there any further questions or comments from questions of councillors? Here and now, I'll just wrap up at the local council. I'd like to make the comment, if I can, from the chair. It was very interesting 13 months ago at the public hearing, and we had in Musquodoboit Harbour, well attended. I want to thank the public that came out at that time, as well as the staff, and the staff that followed this through this difficult COVID time. It's been now 13 months later, and we're to this point today. Looking forward to this application going forth. I hear the concerns of the neighbors about the environment. We've learned from Walkerton about contamination of water supply from an agricultural source, and I think that all departments across this country have learned that lesson. So I understand there's requirements and setbacks from water courses and from wells, so I'm pretty sure that will be respected at the foremost. And so I'll call for the question on the motion then. All those in favor of the motions before us for case 22519, approve the development agreement? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next item of business on the agenda. We have We've done with correspondence, delegate, any presentation, no petitions, no delegations tonight?
Mr. Chair, if I can briefly just jump in to note that in addition to the correspondence submitted for the public hearing item 10.1, we also did receive one piece of general correspondence, which has been circulated to all members of Community Council.
Thank you. Were there any petitions? Councilors have any petitions to be filed to Community Council? Hearing none. Information items brought forward, none. Next is item 13.1, the staff report of case 22285, development agreement to allow a 12-story multi-unit dwelling at 3 Barton Road in Dartmouth. Ask for a mover, I believe. We have a staff presentation on this from Jamie Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a presentation that I can offer if the council would like some additional information. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods heads.
I see affirmation for that, please, and thank you.
Okay, super. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, is the clerk's office going to operate the presentation?
At your convenience, we are able to present with you. If you have it loaded up and you'd prefer to advance your own slides, we can also defer to you if you'd like.
You've got it there, so that works for me. Thank you.
Sounds good.
So we can move to the next slide. My name is Jamie Ellen Klenovic. I'm a planner with the Urban Enabled Applications team with HRM. If we have the next slide. This is an application by Twin Lakes Development on behalf of property owners Twin Lakes Development Limited, Robert Ewell, and the Association of Nova Scotia Land Surveyors. The location of the subject site is 3 Bartland Road and 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road in Dartmouth. The proposal is for a development agreement to allow 2 12-story residential towers with ground floor commercial uses fronting on Prince Albert Road. Next slide, please. Some features of the proposal. The proposal is to construct 2 12-story residential towers on a common podium with commercial uses at grade. There's underground parking proposed, approximately 176 dwelling units, and both towers are approximately 42 meters tall. Next slide. We can see on the left a zoomed out view of the location of the subject site. It's across Prince Albert Road from the Braemar Superstore and just west of Lake Bannock, a little bit southwest of McNack Mall. On the right, we can see in the red outline is the subject site. You can see it's kind of a U-shaped site with one property on Prince Albert Road that's not included in the subject site. You can see on the left of this photo the Braemar Superstore, and on the right and to the west of the subject site is Eldreddy Elementary School. Could we have the next slide, please? So this is a view of the subject site from Prince Albert Road. The building immediately in front of the camera with the white garage door is not included in the subject site. The yellow building and the blue building are both included. Next slide, please. Again, a view from Prince Albert Road. The blue and yellow buildings are both included in the subject site. And in the center of the photo, just to the right of the sign, is a small building that's also included in the subject site, and the white building on the right is also included. Next slide, please. And this is a view a little bit further in from the former Bartland Road. Next slide, please. So there is currently a development agreement approved for this site. It was approved in 2006 and came into force in 2013. It allows 84 dwelling units. The maximum height of the building is a little under 39 meters. It provides 139 square meters of outdoor amenity space. It also requires a 10-meter wide public recreation trail connecting Prince Albert Road and Eldreddy Elementary School, and requires a minimum of 105 parking spaces. So in the site plan on the right of this slide, the approved building is in gray on the top of the slide. Next slide, please. So this is a view this is the west elevation of the approved development. Next slide. The north and south elevations. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed development as seen from Prince Albert Road. You can see the small building on the left with the white garage door that would be excluded from the development site. Next slide, please. And this is the view from the south side view, looking up toward up toward the subject site with your back toward Lawrence Street. Next slide, please. So the zoning on the site is corridor. It provides a maximum of 6 stories. That's for 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road. For 3 Albert Road, the zoning is HR1, higher order residential, and the maximum height is 14 meters or approximately 4 stories. Designations are similar. 325A and 327 Prince Albert Road are designated corridor, and 3 Bartland Road is designated higher order residential. The site is currently vacant. Next slide, please. So what about the center plan? Center plan came into effect in 2019. Staff received this application for a development agreement before the adoption of the center plan, and due to transition policies in the regional center municipal planning strategy, we are able to consider this application under the policies that were in place at the time the application was received. So in this case, that means that the enabling policy is in the Dartmouth municipal planning strategy is policy IP5. Next slide, please. So the Dartmouth MPS policies IP1C and IP5 enumerate criteria to evaluate the application. Relevant criteria include compatibility and consistency with adjacent uses and built form, provisions for landscaping, buffering and screening, adequacy of existing traffic and service networks, proximity to schools and recreation amenities, discouraging a scattered development pattern, safe pedestrian movement within the site, drainage and soil stability, adequacy of parking, usable amenity space, and encouraging preservation of mature trees and other natural features. Next slide. So as you note from the agenda and from the staff report, this application is coming forward with a negative recommendation from staff. The key policy concerns are coming from IP1C2 and IP5, specifically relating to compatibility and consistency with adjacent uses and the existing development form in the area. This is particularly relating to height, bulk, scale, and exterior design. We're also concerned about amplified wind effects, particularly on the Alderney Elementary School property and 10 Lawrence Street. Because there are 2 towers in the development, this gives the effect of 2 buildings, which intensifies the effect of the height and the scale. The proposed building also has very large floor plates, which would again aggravate the already significant height difference. And I would note that all surrounding development in these areas, 2 stories or less, including the 2 sites that are abutting subject site, single unit dwelling at 325 Prince Albert Road and a 2-story multiple unit dwelling at 335 Prince Albert Road. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is the subject site outlined in red. Can you advance the slides? There's a single unit dwelling here abutting the subject site. Next slide. And this is the 2-story multiple unit dwelling that's cut out of the middle of the subject site. Just to the north of the subject site on the left of this photo, abutting the property is another 2-story dwelling. It's a 2-unit dwelling. So we have 2-story development all around this area. Can I have the next slide, please? So what we're asking Council to do is to refuse the proposed development agreement and refuse the applicant's request to discharge the existing development agreement. So the existing development agreement would stay in place, but it expired in November of 2020. So in that case, then we're asking Council to allow a time extension so the original development agreement could be acted upon by the applicant. Next slide. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jane Dillon. Any questions of councilors? Councilor Austin, I assume, would have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jamie, for the presentation. This is an interesting one. It goes back a ways when you consider, I think it was 2006 was the first development agreement application on this site. The question I have is regarding the wooded area at the top by Alderney Elementary. I know, Jamie, we had a chance to talk about that earlier. If where the proposed development agreement applies to the entire property, but the applicant has indicated that they will eventually want to subdivide off a portion of it, and that development agreement will then apply to both the subdivided piece and the top piece. What does it look like in terms of like the process of as of right development under the center plan for the lot that would be separated off from the rest of it? Where I'm going for is I'm wondering what control we have on protecting the green wooded area at the top. Would the applicant have to come back to council before discharge that agreement on a subdivided chunk that comes off of it before they could do anything with it? Like how does that work?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, back to the councillor. So the development agreement is structured so the wooded area on the western side of the site at the top of the hill is to be protected. There's a preliminary landscaping plan attached to the development agreement which labels those areas as to remain. So the intention there is that the development officer would require a detailed landscaping plan to be submitted prior to permitting, and that more detailed landscaping plan would also protect those areas. However, if the DA is discharged, then there wouldn't be anything to protect those areas and require the property owner to maintain those trees. It is within their right to ask community council to discharge the development agreement in the future, but that would require a conversation with community council, and it would be a resolution from council to allow that discharge.
So it wouldn't be, it would have to come back to council, not as a public hearing, but at least as a motion.
Yes, that's our intention.
Okay, in discharging a development agreement, can you discharge it from a portion of property, or like could the development agreement remain in place on the Bartland Road section, but then be discharged off of subdivided lot over on the other piece of the U on the other side?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, it could be partially discharged. That's under authority from the HRM charter. There's also language in the development agreement that permits discharge if the development is completely or partially complete. So in either situation, they would be able to discharge development agreement against part of the DA area. Our legal advice is that would require a subdivision, so we can't apply the DA to part of the site now. We would have to wait until after the property is subdivided, and then they could apply for the newly subdivided property to be removed from the DA area.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. So colleagues, where I'm at on this one is everything around Graham's Grove is strange when it comes to property. We have an as of right option here that would have the entire wooded area and a large building put on the crest of the hill. The developers come back with what we have in front of us now, with a larger building, because now there's two towers instead of one, but moved down the hill, put on fronting on Prince Albert. In terms of the community feedback on it, it was a startling public meeting at the Micmac Aquatic Club. I can't remember if Councillor Mancini, if you popped your head into it or not. The public who was there, and it wasn't, sometimes you can kind of tell in a meeting if there's a bunch of plants. I did not get the sense that was the crowd. The public was very supportive. There was, I think there was only one speaker who really kind of had much negative to say. And so based on that, I think we should proceed. I mean, we're not making a decision tonight on this project. We're making a decision tonight on whether or not we want to hold a public hearing. I would like to put this out to the community and actually have a hearing, because I think there is some merit here that should be considered. So I would, where I'm at tonight is I would like us to vote down the staff recommendation, which is, goodness knows, is not something that I've really advocated for, I think, in any planning application in my 5 years. But I would like to vote that down and move with the alternative to have a public hearing and carry this forward for further discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Mancini, you have a question, sir?
I do. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much. I have a couple of little questions. That building you alluded to a couple of times to the left with the white garage door. What is that building? Is that a residential building? You said multi-use. What is it?
It's commercial on the ground floor and residential on the second floor.
Okay.
Tim Hortons.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's owned. Who'd you say, David?
One of the Tim Hortons franchise.
Is that right?
That's his office for the Tim Hortons offices.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. And you talked about the wind. Was there a wind study done?
There was a qualitative wind study done. So it didn't involve a wind tunnel. It involved professional opinion from a wind expert in Halifax.
And you alluded to the wind having impact to the school. Why is that a negative? I'm trying to understand that.
So from a safety perspective, the concern is that there are the nodes of the intensified wind effects at the school are right outside the doors for emergency egress and entrance to the building. So the concern is that if there's amplified wind effects there, it will be more difficult to open the doors.
Okay. And do you know if the applicant is prepared to go back to what is actually approved on that unit? Do you have any idea? Excuse me.
My understanding is that they are. I don't speak for them, but my understanding is that they're prepared to build what's approved.
Okay. So, the council of the area is asking us to vote down what's on the floor, and then we go to a public hearing. Could you explain to me what happens after the public hearing then? What's the next steps after the public hearing? We come back here again in the same, in a different motion? How does that work?
Yeah, so it would still come forward with a negative staff recommendation.
So still the same motion in front of us after public hearing.
Okay. Yeah, but this would be a one step. You would just make your decision on the application after the public hearing. So if there's a rezoning, then we do it in two different meetings, but this is something that we could handle in one meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Kent, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so Jamie, I'm having a hard time sort of figuring out what it is that you're recommending in the first place.
Yeah.
Because I'm having a hard time finding attachment C. I found a Schedule C. Is the Schedule C, the attachment C the same, or could we see? Because, yeah.
Well, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, what is supposed to be in attachment C?
But approved, this number 4, approved by resolution, the proposed second amending agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment C. So I'm just curious, what are we actually suggesting might be approved? Because I can't find it.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation from staff is to say no to the new proposed development agreement, and therefore also say no to the discharge. Right. So we wouldn't be asking, we're not asking council to discharge the existing development agreement. So what we are saying is the existing development agreement expired in early November. So that would require a time extension if the applicant is going to act on that development agreement. The recommendation is that council approve the time extension.
So is it by approving it, we're creating a second amending agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And that second amending agreement is in relation to their very first agreement that just expired, of which
the original one, yeah.
Which I don't know what that is. And then require the second amending agreement to be signed. Okay, that's normal. Yeah. Okay. And so, Councillor Austin, you spoke of an alternative. Is that in the staff report? I I don't know about anybody else, but I find online it's hard to be seeing staff reports and flicking through all the the many layers and finding what you're talking about. So if anyone has the
I can. This is Simon Ross Sequel here, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. If you look through the staff report, just past the environmental implications section, there's a section entitled Alternatives, and there are several alternative motions there. I believe this is on page, yes, page 8 of the staff report.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. What is it? Okay, so alternative, which number did you choose, Sam?
Number 1.
No, you want to, oh, so you're choosing to go forward with this. So go to the public hearing. It's not an alternative. It's being suggested alternative. It's an alternative that you're putting forward.
No, number 1.
Just ask, yeah, so you're asking for number 1. I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about a particular alternative that staff put forward. Okie dokie, yeah. I think I'm caught up. Are we out of order, Mr. Chair? Because have we put a motion on the floor that we've actually got to the point where we should all be commenting? Like, I feel like we haven't got there.
We haven't got the motion on the floor yet. We just had the presentation first, so we have a better appreciation of what the motion is, because I find it myself a little perplexing, and so
okay.
I'll request the motion be put on the floor first, and we'll have further debate. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just scroll up here. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 refuse the proposed development agreement enabling the development of a 12-story multi-unit dwelling at 3 Bartland Road, as set on attachment A of the staff report dated August 12, 2020. 2, refuse the proposed discharging agreement as set on attachment B of the report. 3, give notice of motion to consider the proposed second amending agreement as set on attachment C of this report to allow an extension to the required date of commencement of the existing development agreement on 3 Bartland Road. 4, approved by resolution the proposed second amending agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment C of this report, to extend the required date of commencement of the existing development agreement on 3 Bartland Road. 5, require the second amending agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Second by Mancini.
Seconded.
Just Claire, Legal Services. It should just be 1, 2, and 3 this evening, because you'd be giving notice of motion for the second amending agreement, and then you'd be coming back right after the notice has been given to actually approve it by resolution, I believe.
Do we have that clarified, Mr. Clark? I think our solicitor post.
Yes, I believe that's correct. I think I would defer to Claire's judgment on this one. Yes.
So you have to give the notice of motion, then you need the time period right to elapse before you can come back and vote on the resolution.
Can I ask a question just to Councillor Austin for clarification?
I have Councillor Purdy on the list first, and then you, Councillor Kent. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. I apologize, but Councillor Austin, you want us to refuse this, or you want this as it is to go to public hearing again to get the support of the community for the 12-story towers, that development. Okay.
You got it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you. So within the motion that was put forward of 1, 2, and 3, is the notice of motion, just remind me, the notice of motion language the thing that's going to get him to his public hearing? Because I don't see anything in relation to public hearing in there.
No, So I think Councillor Austin's intention is that he will propose that this be voted down. This is the staff recommendation, if I'm correct.
Okay.
So what number three gets is essentially an extension of the current DA. No changes, just an extension in time in order to build what is currently approved. So that's the staff recommendation, is essentially to refuse the new agreement, but give the developer a little bit more time to build what's currently approved.
So if I understand it, Councillor, you want to clarify this for the record.
Yeah.
For motions 1 and 2, you want us to vote those down, and would that also vote down number 3 to give notice, or vote the third one down as well, Councillor Austin?
So my understanding from talking to staff today is that we would, and perhaps the clerk or legal can correct, would be to vote down this motion, because this is the staff motion, and then move the alternative listed on page 8, the number 1, which is give notice of motion A, B, and C.
That's what I was getting at. Okay.
Sounds like an Adam's Gambit to me.
It is the Adams Gambit. I have not had a chance much to ever use it. I'm generally supportive of the position that our staff tests out. This one is, I mean, this is just an odd situation to begin with, where we have an as-of-right option that has design elements that I think could actually be worse. And this area is a very interesting spot where we're caught between. So, I mean, there is some low-rise residential. There's also some significant buildings there, one of which I'm not so thrilled to have, our 16-story hotel. It's a confusing situation. And this is coming from the perspective of, I think I had 40 minutes of Jamie Ellen's time today to help me with it. But one of the main things for me is that the public meeting for this project was very much not like any public meeting that I can recall. People were in support of the project, and so based on that, I think we should be sending this for a public hearing to get the public's feedback, and then we can weigh all the pros and cons, including the staff recommendation, in making our decision.
Okay. Any further questions of councillors? Councillor Purdy, you okay? Councillor Mancini, Councillor Beck, Becky Kent. That's okay. I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed to the motion, please say nay.
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 Nay. Okay. So I'll ask for another motion. Councillor Austin.
Councillor Austin, just could I interject? Just it'll just be 1A that you'll be giving.
Just 1A.
Yeah, because you'll be giving notice of motion and then scheduling the public hearing. The next B and C will come back at after the public hearing.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of this report and schedule a public hearing.
There we go.
Your seconder, please.
Second, Mancini.
Second by Councillor Mancini. Any further questions on this? Any idea from the clerk's office when you think a public hearing may be held?
I would have to speak with staff first and understand the relevant timelines regarding advertisements and our scheduling of meetings for next year as well.
And with the COVID pandemic, I'm kind of curious of what kind of format this may take.
I wouldn't be able to provide much detail regarding that. That would be a discussion that I think would have to be had with the municipal clerk, and is likely to evolve with the changing circumstances around the public health measures in place at that time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? There are none. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried. I have a request here for a rest break for 5 minutes. Can we take a 5-minute recess? It's 8 o'clock. Okay with everyone? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess to, we'll be back in 8:07 hopefully. See you back in 5. We stand recess. Yes, dear. No, somebody else had to go. Becky had to go.
Hello there. Is this Simon? Hello.
Hi. Yes. Hi. I'm available. Yes.
Hi there. This is the captioner. I'm noticing that the audio on some of the counselors, that they're cutting out, and even on the staff that they're cutting out often, and it's quite hard to understand and even put a sentence together sometimes.
Sorry, I will. What I will do is I'll reach out independently. I'll send an email to ICT, and we'll see if we can do anything about that.
Okay, sure. I think it sounds like maybe the mics are caught on clothing or stuck in hair or something, that it's getting very muffled, something like that. I don't know.
Well,
I'll
stuck in hair.
We can
I know
have
it's
a
not me.
discussion offline on this.
Well, I'm using the microphone on the laptop, so I have no earphones, no earbuds, no nothing.
Same as me.
But I just got a note there from Trish. She's having some internet problems.
We were hearing background people too, and I didn't know if that was where that was coming from. What happened there, David, when we had two people on the line at the same time, like coming through? Was that normal? Like, remember the gentleman was the second caller?
Normally one should have been muted, but I think he was listening in and didn't mute himself, and I think we heard his wife in the background.
Oh, okay.
Is Councilor Purdy back on the air here with us? I see her initials there.
Sorry, yes, I am.
Is Councilor
I'm here.
Is Councilor Mancini with us?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, are you ready to resume?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're ready to resume whenever you are ready.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. It's now 8:10, and we left off the agenda. Next order of business, disclosure. Let's find it here again.
(13.1.2).
Yeah, case number 22921, the discharge of development agreement corner of Wise Road and Paysan Street. Okay, staff, members of council, you want a presentation on this to explain what's going on with this particular long and drawn out story?
I don't think it's necessary, Mr. Chair, if I may.
It's okay, Mr. Councilor Austin, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion on and then speak to it. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council 1 approve by resolution the discharge agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set on attachment A of the staff report dated May 21st, 2020, and 2, require that the discharge agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void, and of obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Okay.
Second by Mancini.
Councilor Mancini seconds the motion. Councilor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilor Mancini. So this is the corner of Belzant and Wise, just in between the Dartmouth Shopping Center and the new Sobeys on Wise Road. More famously, it was Little Nashville, Matadors. It was a sensational strip club for a time. Then it all closed out, and then a hole in the ground. And there's been 2 applications in the past on this property. One was for a 10-story building that council ended up approving, but the economics of it just never worked for that particular developer. So then when the building code changed and allowed 6 stories to be built out of wood, they went back and they changed the original development agreement to make it a 6-story building to take advantage of that, of the economies of using the cheaper material rather than concrete. And so that brings us forward to today, where I guess I should say after that, we also had the center plan come in, and the development rights on this property, it's now much more flexible than development agreement. And so the arrival of the center plan has really rendered the need for a development agreement on this piece of property pretty much moot. They can do a redesign. I understand the property has changed hands. The new owners can do a redesign if they wish. There's plenty of existing opportunity under the center plan to hopefully finally put something on this hole in the ground that has been on this corner for the last, it's got to be about a decade or more now. Since this piece of land saw any productive use. So that's all we're doing tonight. We're closing the door on the second development agreement for a 6-story building. It doesn't take anything away from the property owner because they have ample opportunity under the new center plan to make something of this property. Thank you.
You're muted, David.
Are there any other questions from any other councilors? Could I just have clarification with the center plan now in effect for the area? What does this do for height limitations or opportunities for this property site? Can someone answer that question, please? What are the height restrictions or opportunities now associated with the site that this development agreement is discharged?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Jamie Ellen Klenovic. I can just look that up. I don't know offhand.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think it's a ground floor area ratio of 4, and there's no upper height limit because in the center growth zones, it's like 90 meters. It's a very large total that no one would really build to, except for maybe a few locations. Certainly not here.
Mr. Purvis.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Carl Purvis. Yes, that's right. The center has the upper limit of 90 meters with a floor area ratio of 5. So they could build 5 times the amount of area on the site upwards to an upper limit of 90.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other questions of any other members of council?
Question?
Seeing none, I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Next item of business is schedule. With a motion, please, to accept the Marine Drive Community Council schedule.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Kent, seconded by Councilor Purdy.
Yay.
So the motion is to approve the 21 meeting schedule as attachment A of the December 3rd staff report. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Next item of business. 13.1.4, council's appointments to boards and committees. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Speaker, put a motion on the floor to nominate Councilor Purdy.
If I can provide just a little bit of context, we should, for process, we can just briefly put the motion on the floor, and then we would open up a nomination process like for our election of chair.
Okay, I'll move that the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council nominate 1 member to the Grants Committee for a term to November 2022.
So moved. Seconded by Councilor Austin.
I've done lots of damage on nominations tonight. I should second one.
I'd like to nominate Councilor Purdy for this position on behalf of Harbour.
And I'll second that nomination.
Seconded by Councilor Mancini. Do you accept the nomination, Councilor Purdy?
I sure do. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll call for any further nominations. Any further nominations? Third and final call. Hearing none, can I have a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Austin, seconded by Councillor Mancini. All in favor to close nominations? Aye.
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 Congratulations, Councillor Purdy, you're on the Grants Committee.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We'll all come to you.
Thank you, everyone. Just for the sake of our minutes taker, could we have a brief a motion to close the public nomination?
I'll move.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So on the motions, we have no motion. Anyone has motions to bring forward? I have none. In camera item, can we do this publicly, or do we need to go in private to discuss the appointments?
Mr. Chair, through you to Community Council, we do have to go in camera for these two items.
Okay, so any before we go into camera, are there any other notices of motion before we go into camera? Okay, I'll take a motion to move into camera.
Sorry, I am just getting a note, I believe, from one of our support folk that says that item 15.2 can be done in public if there is direction from Community Council to do so.
Yeah, I'll put that on the floor, Mr. Chair, if my colleagues are okay with that.
Councilor Mancini moves item number 15.2.
That the, Simon, I'm reading the one that's on the agenda. Is that to ratify it?
Yes, that's correct. We can read the one that's on the agenda. That should be fine.
That the citizen council appointments to boards and committees in keeping with public appointment policy adopted by regional council. That can't be the right one.
No,
the motion below it. The Harbour East Marine.
Yeah. Perhaps if just wait just a moment, I can do a bit of word crafting for.
Well, the motion's there, right underneath the web line.
No, that's just telling us to go
Let's
into
go into camera. Let's go into camera. Yeah, sorry.
We need the Jeopardy music.
Thank you for your patience. I can put in the chat the recommended ratification motion.
Are you in the same chat with us, Simon?
Yes, I should be in the same chat.
Yeah,
I believe it just
I see it now. Yes. Councilor Mancini, you see the motion there?
It's not coming up. It's slow.
Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council convey staff review committee so that they can just approve the recommendations outlined.
Sorry, please disregard. That's not the recommended.
Has it started snowing where you are yet? No.
I don't think it's supposed to start till tomorrow at noon.
Yeah.
Just in time for rush hour. Great.
My oldest daughter was pretty bummed because I was like, "No, they're not going to cancel school when you're getting when it's going to arrive like an hour before dismissal."
And all the brine is being applied today everywhere.
Yeah.
There you go, Counselor.
Okay, that Harbor East Marine Drive Community Council approve the recommendations outlined in the private confidential report. So moved.
Second.
Counselor Austin, second that? Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried.
So that just brings us to 15.1. We will need a motion to go in camera for that item, and
We'll take a motion to move in camera, please.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Austin, seconded by Counselor Mancini. All those in favor of going to camera, say aye.
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 So we now
Aye.
leave this meeting and go into the other appointment.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, that's correct.
In the other side.
A little concerned when Councillor Hensby says to us, "I'll see you on the other side." That could mean so much.
Hey, don't be ghosted by that.
His chairmanship power might go to his head, eh?
Yeah.
As soon as we get back, we're allowed to go back in public. We'll never see Chambers again in Alderday. They'll all be in, Musquedabbit Harbour, wherever. 100 islands. We'll be doing it on the islands.
You wish we got meetings up there.
I believe we
we have back. See Councillor Kent's back. Is Councillor Purdy back on yet?
Trish, are you there?
Earth to Trish. Come in, Trish.
Yes, sorry. Yes, hi. I'm having really bad internet connection. So sorry.
It's been one of those days.
Okay. All right. Is everybody present and accounted for? It looks like we are online again. So I'd like to go back. Mr. Clerk, can you put us back into a public session, please?
Can do.
Okay. May I have a motion to come forward from our in-camera dialogue? Councillor Austin, I believe you had a motion to come forward.
I do, if it's in front of me. I always hate these in-camera ones. Is the one in the chat the one I need to read?
Same as before.
Chat one here now. I believe so. Let me just.
I think I can place a recommendation in the chat just now.
So I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council approve the recommendation as outlined. Oop, no. Now I see it. I move that Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council make the appointment to the Regional Watershed Advisory Board as discussed during the in-camera private session.
Moved by Councillor Austin, seconded by Councillor Kent. Okay, any further debate? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, next item of business is, I believe, our next meeting is in the new year. Any parting messages to our adoring public out there in the community council before we head off for the holiday period?
Well, be safe and have a wonderful holiday. Namaste.
Yeah, be safe. Stay well. Take the time you need with your family. This is a unique experience that we're about to have. Oh, some people will be able to gather with family and some won't, but know that lots of people are sending strength to each and every one of you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
And if you want some extra grub, I know Councillor Purdy's got so many people, they won't even notice us being there, so drop by her house.
Especially the bubble being increased to 10 people now instead of 5, it'd be merrier for a lot of families we know. So
yeah,
thank you.
Have my kids here instead of just a few.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Being Italian, 10 people, that means I only need 90 more for Christmas.
Listen, you guys,
right.
thanks so much. We'll
happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Have a blessed and safe holiday season. Good night, everyone.
We need a ho-ho there, Mr. Chair.
Ho, 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 and away we go.
Take care.
Okay, good night, folks.
Good night and bless us, everyone.